everybody, to another episode of Beyond Haunted Vermont. And if you have a story that is inside the Green Mountains or beyond the Green Mountains, please contact us by visiting hauntedvermont.org, or you can email us at hauntedvermont802@gmail.com. Now, nonetheless, before I start spittering and sputtering and everything else, we have a very interesting special guest today who I will actually just bring on right now before I even butcher his last name again. Tom Mihok. Tom, thank you for joining us. You are basically a cryptozoologist. You're a paranormal investigator. You have formed the Pennsylvania Hills Bigfoot, I think. Pennsylvania Bigfoot Society. There it is. And then you're also part of the FayWest Paranormal. But you're also appearing, I think it's just the Phantom Light documentary that Small Town Monsters had did. And I forget if you're actually on the Sasquatch Unearthed, the Ridge, which was technically the original series of it before Phantom Light. I'm pretty sure is how that worked. But anyway, you can correct me with all this anyway. But Tom, welcome aboard.
Thanks very much for having me. Appreciate it. Yeah, I'm a field investigator with the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Society. Eric Altman is our director. I did form the Penn Hills Paranormal group a while back when I used to focus a lot on hauntings and more strictly paranormal type cases. Really now I focus mostly on the cryptozoology. I've been researching with Eric Altman, Stan Gordon, here in Western Pennsylvania, focusing mostly on the Chestnut Ridge.
On the Chestnut Ridge, yeah, which looked to be like a crazy hotspot for the mysterious lights, which I guess for the conversation, because I talked to Ronald Murphy, I talked to another guy recently by the name Dale Kazmarek, and I noticed Ronald liked to call them Earth lights, Dale liked to call them ghost lights. So I guess for this conversation, so I can stick with how you like to look at them, what do you call
them? I mean, earth lights, orbs, spirit lights. I mean, I really don't have one particular name for them because we really don't know what they are. I'm good friends with Ron Murphy. I investigate with him as well. In fact, Ron was with us the night that I had my first of two experiences. But yeah, I mean, we really don't know what they are. So it's hard to really pin down a name for them. I mean, if somebody focuses their research on the UFOs or UAPs, they would tend to call them mini UFOs. Some people refer to them as earth lights, elementals, will-o'-the-wisp. It really just depends on what your background's in, I think. Because like I said, nobody really knows for sure exactly what they are.
Right, which when I was doing some digging even, I've also noticed that back in the day before it was noticed as, or dubbed the will-o'-the-wisp, they used to actually call them jack-o'-lantern, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
Which, I was just like, why would they call it jack-o'-lantern? And then when you kind of read the little term that they gave it, it was just because of like the weird, jack-o'-lantern effect, I guess it gave, or something like that. I can't exactly remember, but I just either way, I just thought it was very interesting that before will-o'-the-wisp that they did in fact call them like jack-o'-lantern. So I guess for now we could always just call them UAPs of the forest, because I know that's another one too.
Yeah, there's a lot of names for them, and they're being cited and experienced more and more all across the country. I mean, they've been around for a long time. Stan Gordon, who is the premier Bigfoot UFO researcher in Pennsylvania, I mean, he's just incredibly well known and well respected throughout the country. He has a book called Silent Invasion, where he talks about a a big flap of Bigfoot and UFO sightings back in 1973 here in Pennsylvania. And he has cases in that book that have Bigfoot sighted along with orbs of light, UFO activity. So, I mean, these things have been going on for years and years. They've been reported in the Chestnut Ridge for decades. Even prior to the one night that I had the particular experience that we'll end up talking about. I mean, I've been on the ridge with Eric Altman and other investigators, and we've seen them at other locations as well. The night that we're going to talk about, it was just much more close up and, you know, a more personal encounter. But yeah, they've been all over the country. People are just now starting to talk about them. I think before, especially when it involved Bigfoot research, you know, most people were of the theory that Bigfoot's just a flesh and blood animal. And that's really what I started out believing too. But as I got to know Stan and Eric, and I read a lot of Stan's casework, there's so many reports where there's paranormal aspects to Bigfoot sightings as well. These balls of light, Bigfoot disappearing in a flash of light, all kind of things. So I'm not going to say I know what Bigfoot or these lights are, but I'm much more open-minded to them being of a paranormal, interdimensional, spiritual, whatever label you want to give them. I don't think that they are strictly flesh and blood. I think it's more complicated than that, because there's too many cases that have all these elements intertwined together. It just doesn't make sense that it's strictly a flesh and blood creature.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And for those that are probably already listening, like, oh God, here we go, we're going to be diving into that aspect, I will do my best not to really touch on that weird woo side too much. But I mean, like Tom just said, and like I have said, you got to be open-minded, and you got to look at each side differently, because I mean, I'll say it. I mean, I'm not an expert at this. I mean, Tom is definitely just not an expert at this. We're all trying to learn, but at the point in time, I don't feel like there. And you might agree with this, Tom. I mean, you could shine in on this if you would like, but to me personally, when it comes to like this weird field, I feel like you can't really call yourself an expert or a professional. You can call yourself an expert for some of it, but not all of it. Would you stand by that?
Oh yeah, I you know, first of all, the way I look at it, if somebody's calling themselves an expert, then find somebody else to investigate with. Because one thing I've learned in the paranormal in general, whether it's hauntings, whether it's, you know, UFOs, Bigfoot, whatever, excuse me, do not speak in absolutes, because nobody has the answers. Nobody can say definitively what any of this means. You know, we all have our theories, and we all have, you know, trends and things that we follow and we observe. But, you know, until we get a Bigfoot on the examining table, you know, we're not going to have the answers. And it's the same with any of the phenomenon: ghosts, orbs, UFOs. You know, I've changed my view on a lot of these topics over the years, and it's because, you know, you start off believing one thing because of maybe the stereotype that surrounds it. But if you investigate these cases and you go out, you know, there's so many other elements that are involved in it. You know, you just can't wrap them into one small little box.
Right. No, I will absolutely agree with that. So I guess before, you know, moving on, Tom, so what's your background anyway when it comes to this, you know, the so-called supernatural world that we, you know, all kind of got into it, whether it be by mistake or some sort of experience? Like, what really got your foot through the door to really start looking at this world that we live in a different perspective?
Well, unlike most of the people you'll see on TV shows, I did not have some traumatic experience as a child to where I'm searching for answers. I've just always loved ghost stories and, you know, weird things. And So back in the early 2000s, once Ghost Hunters came on, and kind of inspired me, just like a lot of people, to get a little bit of equipment and go out and try this stuff for myself. So I started investigating hauntings. Investigated a lot of public areas, or Moundsville Prison, Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, all the big name places. But then I started to really focus on private investigations. I've investigated some private businesses, some private homes, things like that. When my twins were born, I decided it was a little too risky to fool around with the hauntings. I know people that have brought things home with them, and I just decided, that wasn't something I was going to risk. So I figure, if I get mauled by a Bigfoot or a dog man, I'm only hurting myself. I'm not involving the kids. So I'll take that chance. But I'm not gonna take a chance on bringing something spiritual home, because unlike people that watch the shows, when you've been out and you've investigated and you have experiences, this stuff is real. And unlike the TV shows at 10 o'clock, you can't just turn it off. So it's a little bit too risky for me at this point. So I started focusing on the cryptozoology. I was fortunate enough to meet Stan Gordon, who, like I said, he's been the premier Bigfoot and UFO researcher in Pennsylvania. Well known all over the country, extremely well respected. And then I was fortunate again to meet his protege, Eric Altman, who's taken me under his wing as far as the cryptozoology. Eric's been investigating Bigfoot for, I believe, going on 30 to 35 years. So he's been doing it quite a long time, is quite knowledgeable. And the thing that I really like about being with Eric and Stan is they are the types of investigators, and this kind of ties into what you were talking about not wanting to go into the woo and things like that. I don't focus on that or any one area of a report or a case. But one thing Stan and Eric will tell you, you have to go where the facts lead you. You can't go into a case thinking, oh, this is going to be a Bigfoot, this is going to be a UFO, a ghost, whatever it is. You just have to follow the facts. And unfortunately, for those of us that always believed in just flesh and blood, those facts have now taken us a little farther abroad, to where we have to, kind of consider some other factors in this mystery.
Right. Another thing that you mentioned, I forget if it was off the air or on the air. I think it was just now on the air, but just for the the clarification, I guess you were talking about, like, with this, like, people are now starting to talk about it more. And funny enough, is I have heard of some sort of mysterious light here in where I'm from, Vermont. I've heard like a couple things actually. We have one where it involved hikers down in the south end of Vermont, where it's around Bennington, or what people would know it as the Bennington Triangle aspect, where a lot of stuff happened back in the day. It's kind of quiet now per se, but anyway, another one that I just remembered right before we got together to talk, Tom, is somebody used to tell me about this weird light that would be almost behind a gravestone. Now, what's funny is when I used to think about that before the mysterious light, that maybe it's one of those like grave that this person maybe allowed the like those grave lights or whatever you want to call them. I figured it's always that, and I said that's probably that debunked. But then when you start to really think about this, it's like, this person never really did tell me if it was staying just behind it, if it was moving at all, did it move, That's the only thing. But when I tried to re-find this person again, I could not find them, which was odd enough. So now because of these weird lights, however you want to look at them, which in this case, this was a cemetery. So would I want to call it a ghost light? Because, is it somebody from the graveyard that has passed on that is trying to make itself known? I'm trying to figure out what else it could maybe be, considering a cemetery and what is around this area. As far as I'm aware, this cemetery does not have like any sort of underground water lines, as far as my knowledge is. But I mean, this area is known for not great service, so you can take that as a grain of salt, basically. And I guess what I mean by that is like there's no, there's a lot of trees. I guess the service isn't great, so I'm assuming the power lines and the telephone service isn't that great. However, the hell that works. So, but yeah, this is the type of stuff that I'm started to think about, like, well, what in this case, what needs to be there in order for these lights to generate? Well, if we look at like limestone and any type of other minerals that would almost act like a battery to generate the environment, the atmosphere, wherever we are, that would be the source of maybe it producing its own energy to then manifest in front of us. So I guess what I'm trying to get at here, Tom, is while your research between these lights or whatever in general, because you also mentioned Dogman, we also hear Dogman being around cemeteries with these lights as well. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't really hear that much about Bigfoot being around cemeteries. So what have you found out with this?
Well, actually, here where I'm at in Pennsylvania on the western end, near Pittsburgh, we do our investigating in the Chestnut Ridge, and that goes. The Chestnut Ridge is, I know you talked about this with Ron in the past. The ridge is nearly 100 miles long, about 5 or 10 miles wide. It goes from Indiana County, Pennsylvania, all the way up until just shy of Morgantown, West Virginia. So we don't really get very many Dogman sightings. In fact, I've never had a report personally. I know that Eric has only had one or two in quite a while. So, I mean, the majority of what we get are the Bigfoot reports, but I will tell you that Eric and Stan, from what I understand, from what they've told me, they have received quite a number of reports of Bigfoot near cemeteries, power lines, creeks. There always seems to be one of those sources connected to a case. I know that they've had at least a couple of sightings in cemeteries where the person had seen a Bigfoot walk into the cemetery and then just disappear. So yeah, I mean that's what I'm talking about when I say you just have to follow the facts. You have to follow what the person is reporting. You don't go into those cases thinking, Bigfoot's a spirit or Bigfoot's a paranormal or interdimensional. But when the witness is telling you that he walked into a cemetery and just disappears, and the witness is nearly in tears talking about the experience, all you can go by is what the witness is telling you. Maybe the witness saw exactly what they said. Maybe they imagined it. There's really no way to know. But all you can do is really go by what the person is reporting. But there have been quite a few reports of cemeteries, water sources like creeks and rivers, power lines especially. And there have been a number of reports not in Pittsburgh, I'm sorry, but the Chestnut Ridge in our area that have not only had a Bigfoot, but have had a ball of light either at the same time, right before, right after the Bigfoot sighting, or in some cases, a Bigfoot sighting that coincides with a UFO sighting, or just before or after. So that's why I said, I went into this believing, or, I guess having my theories being UFOs are just extraterrestrials from outer space, Bigfoot's a flesh and blood. But then when you hear all these other reports that have come down the pipe over the years, they don't fit that mold. So that's why you have to consider other theories.
Right. So, okay, I want to go back to a few things, Tom, real quick, just for clarification.
Sure.
So, I'm glad that you actually brought up the Chestnut Ridge, because I don't think Ronald actually kind of explained that area when I talked to him, which is fine. But plus, for those that did listen to that, he was on a time restraint. So unfortunately, what we had time for, he could only do. But anyway, going back real quick. So is Chestnut Ridge part of the Appalachian Trail at all?
It's the farthest end of the Appalachian Mountains. It is.
Okay.
Just the farthest part of it, or just off of the Appalachian Mountains. And like I said, it's a pretty long and pretty wide ridge, and it has had, for the last 100 or more years, yearly reports of everything from Bigfoot, Black Panthers, UFOs, hauntings, sonic booms, underground, loud booming noises that nobody can explain, as if there's explosions underground, thunderbirds. At one point, several years back, Stan Gordon actually had a report. I think it was Stan, it could have been Eric. One of them had a report. Somebody reported actually seeing a dragon flying through the Chestnut Ridge. And by that, I mean something that looks dragon-like, like prehistoric, or,
What we would look at the dragon, yeah.
Right. And this is, in fact, the one of the Philadelphia newspapers years back wrote a big article on the Chestnut Ridge and dubbed it Pennsylvania's Twilight Zone. So, yeah, it's really, really active year after year. Nobody knows why, but it's all different phenomena. It's not one thing.
Right. Okay, so where would I all going with this next that you said? Because you just brought up a couple other things. Okay, well, crap. Maybe if you re-say the things again, I'll remember. But you just brought up these weird sonic booms that are like underground. Well, from what I recall from the documentary, they were talking about that area was known for like mining back in the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So even though you guys are saying we're not really sure about these sonic booms, but could we maybe say, for some weird reason, it might be some sort of residual haunting of the mining from when they maybe had to blow up the whatever when they were mining, I guess?
It's definitely possible. I mean, like I said, nobody really knows exactly what causes these phenomena. So, I mean, I certainly can't say it's not that. It could be anything, because just like, when people talk about noises in the woods, or like when they're out researching Bigfoot and they say they hear a tree knock, well, that must have been Bigfoot. Well, I didn't see what made the noise, so I can't say what it is. Right. It may be something that's associated with Bigfoot, but it could also be a hiker walking through the woods banging, an axe handle on a tree. So you just really don't know if you don't see what is actually causing it. But these booms, they've been reported year after year. Nobody knows what they are, but they're loud enough that people, it's not just one or two people hearing it. It's a whole town or a whole area of people that are hearing these noises. So what they are, we just don't know.
Right. Okay, now I'm actually remembering what I was going to also ask you too, because of what you brought up with the cemetery and stuff. Yeah. So you mentioned this one person that saw a Bigfoot walking into the cemetery. That's what it was, and then it disappeared. Yeah. Well, I don't know the full content here, but oh man, what do they say that they do now? The spider crawl, like they get down like a spider crawl. So did this person ever say like this Bigfoot may have noticed them, therefore they drop down to almost, kind of like do like the spider crawl so they couldn't be seen? Or was it like the area was I don't know, wet enough, maybe muddy enough, maybe snow out of whatever, where it should have left like a imprint on the ground, therefore that's why they're saying it vanished?
Well, I didn't investigate that particular case. That I had heard from Stan and Eric. That's one of the cases they investigated. So I don't really know all the
details either.
Specific details.
Okay.
But from what I remember, just generally speaking, the person that saw it walk into the cemetery, apparently it was a very wide open cemetery. And when the person stopped their car or turned their head back, there should have been no way that whatever it was could have gotten out of sight. It was too far to the wood line. It was, nowhere for it really to go. So, again, that wasn't my case, so I don't really have all the specifics. That would be something that Stan or Eric would have to really answer. But it's very similar with a lot of reports that come down to where Bigfoot or whatever these creatures are spotted in a particular area, and then they just vanish. And the question is always, why don't we have a body? Well, again, I've always started from being flesh and blood only. But when you have people saying that they see a Bigfoot walking across the highway, and then before it gets 2 lanes over, it vanishes. If the person is being honest, if they really saw what they saw, that doesn't sound like flesh and blood. That sounds more to it. So again, you can only go by what the witness reports.
Yep.
But some of these cases lean more towards a paranormal or interdimensional explanation.
Right. So here we go again.
Yeah.
All right. I tried not to.
It's a rabbit hole.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. But I know for the listener, they're probably gonna beat me over the head if I don't ask this as a way of me being open-minded and stuff about and trying to, I guess we could say, look at every angle possible. So again, you brought up that they, in this case, these people said vanished. Okay. So what would, from what you can recall, Tom, is when they mean vanish, like, is that the only word they could describe it versus like, it took, what did you say, like 2 or 3 steps, and then it was like gone basically, and then so, and I guess what I want to ask for this to try to solve it is, it's not like this Bigfoot that was crossing the street disappeared like in some wood line or whatever was on the other side. And therefore, as they drove by, they saw it. That sort of thing. No,
that what this particular case, and again, this was a case that Stan and I believe Eric also investigated. This was a creature that was walking across the 4-lane highway, and before it got to the middle of the highway, it just disappeared. It was nowhere near the woods. It was nowhere near, something that it could duck down behind. And again, this is one of the reports that I say, I'm not saying that Bigfoot is any specific entity. I'm not saying it's, alien, interdimensional. I'm not saying what it is because I don't know. There are a lot of sightings that, seem very normal, flesh and blood, esque, that, you can explain, a number of sightings along the Chestnut Ridge, for example, have people jogging or walking, and they're going down a trail and they see 30 yards down from them, they see a Bigfoot go out of the woods, cross in front of them, walk into the other woods. There have been people along the Chestnut Ridge that have been jogging in the morning, Just one particular area. It's called Gray Station. It's active railroad tracks. Lady rounded a bend and said that she saw a Bigfoot carrying a deer over its shoulder, and it walked into the woods. So there's lots of reports that are like that seem very, normal, if you want to use that word for a Bigfoot sighting. But at the same time, there are other reports that just have a whole other set of characteristics.
Yeah.
And again, as researchers, you go out, you hear what the witness has to say, and you take the facts down, or at least what they're saying are the facts, and that's what you investigate. So I'm certainly not saying that Bigfoot is any specific thing. We really don't know, but we're just getting a lot of reports that are all over the spectrum.
Yeah, right. And I'm not trying to say they're elemental beings.
Right.
I'm just trying to clarify what you are recalling, because
there are a lot of sightings that, like I said, are just very normal, but then there are those sightings like people that say that they vanished right in front of them.
Right.
If you read Stan's book Silent Invasion, he has a case along the Chestnut Ridge where the lady came out and one was just feet in front of her, and according to the report, the person shot at it and it vanished in a flash of light.
I've heard that again too.
Yeah.
And
so,
not to cut you off too, Dale, but I think this will help fit your narrative too. So if people go back and listen to the conversation that I had with Dale, Dale brought up an example that I've always used, but I could never remember where it came from. I just always remembered the example though, which is, and I'll say it to you, Tom. So it's about this the famous photo, now that I know it, so I can add more details now. But yeah, it's about this famous photo from Wisconsin, from Brace Road, and it's snow on the ground, and it's these footprints that just stop. They just stop. And as Dale even put it, and as I have said it too, when I ask people, well, what are your thoughts of it? And I'll ask you, Tom, just before we go into your story too, but which is, if this entity or whatever this was, we'll just say for the example here, because who knows what the hell it was, but if these tracks all of a sudden just stop and it doesn't, go to the left and go to the right, doesn't continue on, and there's snow on the ground. So I just want to make mental note of this for everybody. Right. You got it, because people got to think about this again, I guess. So, and theoretically, as I brought up before, and I've been told this plenty of times, and I've heard this plenty of times, which to me make no sense. If a Bigfoot were to go backward into the same tracks that he just made, you're going to get that double print. Right, Tom?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how come then this famous photo from Bray Road in Wisconsin basically showed the footsteps that lead into the snowy field, open field, I should say, and all of a sudden that's it. It's like a portal opened up and this thing stepped through it. So I love bringing that example up. But what are your thoughts on this, about the whole idea of some people look at it as, well, they must be going backwards into the same track that they're going? I know I've kind of said double print, but I'd like to hear from you.
Well, I mean, I guess I can't say that that's impossible, because, we don't know, but I wouldn't think that's very plausible. I mean, these animals or creatures or whatever they are, they're standing anywhere from 7 to 9 feet tall. They're, how many hundreds of pounds. I don't know that I could backtrack in my own footsteps, in the snow, and be exact and not leave double prints. And, and you're talking about a creature that big. I just don't see that as happening. But, again, I'm not there, so I don't know. But again, Ron Murphy, if I'm not mistaken, he had that happen to him. He used to live right at the base of the Chestnut Ridge. And if I'm not mistaken, I may have him mixed up with somebody else. I could be mixing people up, but I think it was Ron that came out one morning and had footprints in his yard that went right to the middle of the yard and stopped. So again, and this is where I say, I'm not saying what Bigfoot is. I'm not saying that I have the answers. I'm certainly not speaking in absolutes. But as somebody who came from a theory or the side that strictly was flesh and blood, these are the types of things that make me stop and say, well, okay, you've got to at least consider other possibilities, because why don't we have a body? Why haven't we found a dead Bigfoot? Now, if the people that believe they're paranormal or interdimensional or spiritual or whatever the case, if they're right, then there's your answer. But like I said to another researcher one time when we were talking about this, I said, how do we know? We're trying to pin down Bigfoot as being just one or the other. We don't know that there aren't several type of creatures. There may be some creatures that are just flesh and blood. There may be some creatures that maybe are more than just flesh and blood. We really don't know. But again, when you look at all these reports, and then this is where we get into the, like the reports with the orbs or the balls of light, whatever you want to call them. It just doesn't make sense that there isn't more to it. We investigate an area, and I guess I'll go a little bit into, lead into the story of what happened to me. We've been investigating an area. We call it Area X, and it's probably been since around 2021 that we've been investigating there. It's a long story how we kind of stumbled across it, but this area is pretty remote. It's up in the ridge. It's about, I want to say, roughly 2 to 3 miles off the main road. Even if you have a 4-wheel drive vehicle, it's hard to get to. Now, it takes us about 10 minutes to drive off the main road and get to this particular clearing. And so we're miles and miles away from everything, but yet right up kind of a little path from this clearing is a cemetery. Now, there's no buildings, there's no houses, there's no roads going to this area that, it's not like I said, it's very difficult to get there, even in a 4-wheel vehicle. So we've been investigating this area now for several years. We've had Bigfoot activity. We've had paranormal activity. We've had everything from howls that we couldn't identify. We've had things bluff charging us through the bush that we can't see, something big making a sound like it's charging at you, then it all of a sudden stops. We've had experiences where we've heard disembodied voices, like mumbling. You can't make out what what sounds like two people having a conversation, but you can't make out what they're saying. We've had experiences where we've had this metallic, kind of like a clinking sound, almost like if you were at a wedding and somebody was tapping a fork on the end of the champagne
on the glass. Oh, yep.
And the Small Town Monsters episodes that I was in was the Sasquatch Unearthed the Ridge. In episode 2, which I believe is called Spectral Bigfoot, they were up with us at Area X, and we filmed an investigation there that night. That night, the metallic sound, the orbs of light, it was all there. The howls were there. There was all kind of activity going on. Seth and the Small Town Monsters crew, Heather and all those guys, they did a great job documenting and filming everything. They actually managed to get one of these orbs or earth lights, whatever they are. They got one of them clearly on film. And, I'll kind of go into, to what happened to me, I guess now. It's,
well, before you do, Tom.
Sure.
Sorry. Before you go into that, the orb. I think you're right about the episode, but the orb, is that the one? I'm trying to remember. It's been a little bit. That the one that was like in front of them, like on the trail or the road per se, and that's the one where they were thinking like it was the other group, I guess, and then somebody would. Just like it could have been Steph, I don't remember, but somebody would like, "Hey, let's go up towards it," and that's when it went out.
Well, yeah, they got the first one on film. It was a large white-colored orb, and right as they started walking, it went out. And then it was probably about, I want to say maybe 10 minutes or so after that, I was with Heather and Ricky Chirby and some other investigators. We were actually in the clearing next to the cemetery, and our group was in the clearing, and then there's a road that connects up to another road, and that's where the other group was. So this long road was in between us. That's where the orb was seen.
Okay.
And about 10 minutes later, after it went out, we're all still, talking about it, trying to figure out what was going on. And then two more lights appeared. One was about the size of a basketball. It was red. And the other one was about the size of a cantaloupe, maybe a little bigger. And it was like a amber color, maybe orange a little bit. And
I think that might be the one that Heather was talking to me about, where it would like
it looked like a car that was parked.
That, and I think she was saying she could see it like reflecting in a puddle.
Right. Because and as we were seeing these lights, the curiosity got the best of me, so I started walking down the road to towards the lights to see how close I could get, to see if I could make out any other details or whatever the case. And I actually got to within about 5 feet of these lights. Now on this road and up in this area of the ridge, there is no ambient light. The road that I'm talking about is canopied by trees on either side. So when it gets dark, it's dark.
Mm-hmm.
And even as I was about 5 feet away from these lights, I'm just thinking it's got to be Seth, or it's got to be one of the camera people. I mean, I didn't know what equipment would have lights that big, but I thought, and I started to say, "Seth, are you there?" And as soon as I spoke, the lights went out. I had a flashlight in my hand that I turned on, and I was the only one on the road.
Wow.
So, I mean, there was nobody around. I wish I could tell you what they were. I've had some after effects of at least I'm assuming it's from the encounter. I really don't know, to be honest with you. About 3 days after that night, I started to get blurry vision in my right eye. So I ended up making an appointment. I went to an ophthalmologist who told me I had a hemorrhage. So I was then sent to a retinal specialist in Pittsburgh, and they ran about every kind of test you can run, scans, shot me up with dye, just anything they could do to figure out what it was, and they had no clue as to why my eye was bleeding. Now I am a diabetic, but my A1C has always been extremely controlled. I'm not on insulin. I've never had a diabetic episode per se. So my first question to the doctor was, well, could it be the diabetes? And he said, no, absolutely not. He said, your numbers are nowhere near an area to where it could cause any type of problem like that. So in that time, since that first bleed in the last several years, I've had close to 15 different hemorrhages in the eye. I've had 6 laser surgeries, 8 eye injections, and I had a vitrectomy where they actually drill into your eye and take the jelly out. Because when the bleeds would occur, they would pull in the jelly, and then I would be looking through a lava lamp for months on end.
Oh, wow.
So, so that's, I can't say that it's the orbs that did it. All I can tell you is I was 5 feet from them. They didn't disappear until I spoke, and then 3 or so days later, my eye was bleeding. It could very well be just a coincidence. But
right.
For the doctor to tell me they have no clue as to why my eye is bleeding, and I actually just had another eye bleed about 2 weeks ago. So, I mean, they're ongoing. And at this point, there's nothing they can do. I could actually send you a picture. I didn't think to send it to you before, but I can actually, in fact, I'll send it to you now. It's a picture that I took when I went in for my last follow-up. He pulled up my eye on the computer, an image of it, and
right.
It shows the scars from all the laser surgeries.
Oh my God.
This picture that I'm about to send you was taken right before my last laser surgery. And after this picture, I got an even 200 more zaps with a laser.
Oh my
God. I just sent that to you.
So I just want to go back real quick, Tom,
sure.
Just to be on the safe side here.
Yeah.
So unless I missed it, so you went down to follow these lights. I guess first off, what made you? I know you said the curiosity took over you, but did you? I'm trying to think of the documentary because I know, like with Tyler, he started to talk. I think it was Tyler, but maybe it was Ronald. But somebody was talking about. It felt like there was electricity in the air. It felt like things were starting to become uneasy. Tyler actually started to feel sickly, stuff like that. And you just mentioned voices, so it wasn't like the light was trying to draw you away from everybody, was it?
I mean, again, I don't know what the lights were, so I can't really say they were or weren't.
Mm-hmm.
When I was close to them, there was, a lot of people talk about, the static electricity effect or an odor. There was nothing. There was nothing. No sound, no smell. But they were illuminating from within themselves. There wasn't like, for example, if you would aim a flashlight and pan it across the road where you see that light trail. There was no light trail. There was no source for the lights. They were self-illuminating.
Basically. Yeah.
I don't know what they were. Again, this area is very secluded. It's deep in the mountain. There's no electricity. There's no I don't know what the closest creek would be, but I mean nothing within eyesight.
Right.
When you go down, if you go over off that road and down into the valley, into the chasm there, I mean it goes down for miles. Okay. So I mean I just don't know,
Right.
And, it's baffling.
Right.
I wish I had an answer, but about 4 weeks after we filmed that and I had that experience, Eric, myself, his son Josh, Ricky Chirby, Connie and Chris Brinker, a bunch of our investigators, we were all up at that area again. And Eric had walked down that road right to those puddles, right where I had the experience. After a few minutes, I walked down and we were in total darkness. We were just talking. Not much had happened that night. And then he looked over my shoulder and said, "They're back." And then there was a red and an orange light about 20 yards away from us on the same road. Right at this time, his son Josh was walking up the road with a thermal FLIR panning from side to side. Josh couldn't see the lights.
Like physically or
Physically.
like on the... Okay.
No, physically, like with the FLIR or without the FLIR. He was oblivious. He could not see them. Me and Eric watched them, and they were not hovering around Josh, but they were close to him. And then after several minutes, they just kind of faded out and disappeared. You know, I just don't know. I don't know what they were.
Okay. No, that's fine. I wouldn't even know where to begin either, Tom, to be honest. So, okay. Geez, so I'm trying to figure out how to word this, Tom. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good.
So let's go back real quick. So you said you followed them down, you saw it, and then it went away. I may have missed it, or maybe I just didn't hear it or something, just because there was so much to take in here. But so when you went and you were by yourself with this light, and it vanished and etc. So how close were you from this light before? I heard you touched it. You reached your hand out and touched it. No,
I never touched it. I never reached out. I think Ron had said that when you were talking to him. And no, when I was literally within about 4 feet.
That's really close, though.
I probably could have reached out and touched it.
Oh, maybe that's what I.
Yeah, meant. but I didn't. I actually, when I got that close, I stopped and I stood for a few seconds, and then I thought, well, maybe somebody's there, and then I spoke. And as soon as I started to ask Seth, is
that's when it went away.
They just vanished. They didn't fade out. They didn't like shoot off somewhere. They were just gone. It was almost like somebody turned the light switch
on or off. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, and it was the minute that I spoke that they disappeared.
Wow.
And that's why Ron had said to me, well, you know, what do you think would have happened if you touched them? And I don't know. You know.
Right. Interesting. Okay, so now we got that out of the way. So I guess real quick, when you were around it, were you feeling anything like coldness, hotness?
No.
Any sort of, something seemed off about these lights, I guess, or like.
No, I mean,
it felt like a normal.
Yeah, I mean, they were just self-illuminating silent lights. The one was about the size of a basketball, and it was solid, like a brilliant red. The other one was, I'd say, a little bit bigger than a cantaloupe, and it was like a white, amberish color. And they were about 2 feet apart from each other. And, I walked up and you hear all these reports of them, and people talk about, you hear static electricity, you smell an odor, or all these other things that are associated with them. And there was none of that. And I didn't feel, threatened. I didn't feel like any dread or panic. I couldn't figure out what they were. And in my mind, I'm thinking, well, maybe it's somebody filming, maybe it's equipment that I'm not familiar with. And then that's when I started to ask if somebody was there, and poof, just gone. And the minute they vanished, I quickly turned my flashlight on, and I was in the middle of that road between our two groups, and there was nothing else, nobody on that road.
Interesting. Okay, so you're going to be the first person I bring this up to, because when I talked to Dale, and again, I don't know if you listened to that conversation, Tom, before you and I here, but when I was talking to Dale about the story he had with this lady that was able to stick her hand through this orb thing and not feel anything or even get harmed, that was blue. So anyway, you're talking like an orange, red, and yellowish color. So let's open up the can of worms with you now, which would be let's look at the orbs and the color spectrum of what they could mean in spirituality. So you said orange, red, and yellow. So let's go with that right now. So if we look at orange, according to the spiritual color meaning, orange would mean it's enlightenment, wisdom, purity, passion, creativity. Okay? Now, if we look at red, red has a lot going on here. So red could mean a few things. Non-threatening, I'm just going to say for the example, we're looking at power, passion, vitality, life force. Okay? That doesn't seem too bad. Otherwise, we can look at it in a completely different way, which is sacrifice, death, sin, and warning and danger aspect would be lastly protection, whatever that's supposed to mean, action, and transformation, which is interesting. Now, yellow gets interesting as well, which we could almost coincide yellow with maybe amber, at least to me anyway. That would sound right to me, which would be enlightenment, wisdom, joy, divinity, energy, harmony, prosperity, nobility. I think that's how you say that. Nobility. Otherwise, it could mean betrayal, deceit, mourning, and fleeting nature, which I find very interesting. So, if we look at it as that, and the way you were just describing, it seemed you were fine until you started to speak. Maybe you spooked it, which is the pun, I guess. In this case, you could call it a pun, and that's why it, vanished. You and I were gonna probably say the same thing. It switched off like a light switch. So if we look at any of those, though, in the colored form of spirituality, does any of the examples that I gave you actually make sense?
Well, to be honest with you, and I know that I want to say this delicately and respectfully, because I'm sure there's a lot of your audience that may look at those color meanings, and I just don't believe in those because, first off, we don't even know what these lights are. So how can we say what colors mean what? So that's where I always go back to, everything with this is theory. Could it mean those things? Sure, it absolutely could. I'm not saying that I know it doesn't. I'm just saying I don't know that there's any particular meaning to those colors. I mean, a lot of the things that you mentioned in what you read off was very comforting or positive. The only thing I can tell you from my experience is I've had a lot of eye bleeds. So, and again, I don't even know that it was the lights. It could be a very big coincidence.
Right.
But, I don't know.
Well, that's what I was thinking. That's what I was thinking when. What color was that again? Sorry, it was. I just want to make sure I say the right one. I think it was orange. No, it was. My God, where was it? Oh boy, where was it? Red. So yeah. I was thinking of the right color. Red, where it says sacrifice.
Right.
So if we let's just say for the example here, sacrifice would be your eye, right? So your eye just got a sacrifice, basically.
Right.
And from the picture I just sent too, which I want to bring up too in a minute again, because I know you mentioned it, but going back to what Dale was saying real quick, and this is why I was starting to think about yours and hers a little bit. Well, from what Dale was sharing, blue signified divine truth, wisdom, communication, peace, healing, introspection, protection, and stability, which is interesting. And then the fact that you're talking like a red and orange, which seems to have a lot going on with that.
Right. Yeah, I definitely didn't have the healing one there that night.
Oh, God, no. Unfortunately, Tom, no, you did not. But it's just, that's what I was starting to think about, because, and then after I talked with Dale, I was like, well, what if everything, like we were kind of stating before, there's different species of Bigfoot, right? What if there's different phantom lights?
Well, exactly. Yeah, I mean, who's to say that some of these lights are not mini UFOs? Maybe some of these lights are elemental spirits from the Fae. Maybe some of them are demonic. Who knows? I mean, that's the whole thing. We really don't know. And again, I'm not saying that I have any of the answers. Maybe those colors mean exactly what was on what you read, and
or at least
I don't know
what we could start looking at them as, maybe. And that's why I was starting to think about when I heard your story, Tom. Like if we go by red, which is the sacrifice, well, like I kind of brought up, like your eye was the sacrifice, in my perspective, I guess, right?
Right. Or I think if I heard you correctly, I think red could also signify death.
Yes.
So, if you want to, if the colors truly mean those things, then maybe had I not spoken, and maybe had I come in contact with one of them physically, maybe I'd have been a lot worse off. Who knows?
Right.
I am a Christian, and I look at a lot of things from a spiritual, or from a Christian point of view. I tend to lean towards the direction that these things were spiritual in nature of some sort. I don't know. I'm not saying they were a demon. I'm not saying they were fairy. I don't know what they were, but I believe they were more of the spiritual realm. I don't, in my interpretation from what I experienced, I don't believe they were mini UFOs. I don't believe they were something like that. But again, I can't say what they were, so I'm just going by what I believe, or not even what I believe, but what they felt like, or what I perceived them as. And I could be wrong. That's the worst and best thing about being in the paranormal. You can have all the theories you want, and damn it, you may be right, or you could be so far off that you just never know. And I don't know that we'll ever have the answers.
I think
maybe someday we will, but yeah, I mean, it's fascinating to me. I've been told I shouldn't go back up there. I've been told that, and I'll be honest, I don't think at this point, if I see lights, I don't think I'll walk towards them again.
Oh, but I wouldn't.
Yeah. I mean, just better to be safe, but yeah, it's fascinating, because these mysteries are just, it's what I've been passionate about for years and years. And I guess I'm both glad and sorry that I had the experience that I did, because what else can you say? It's I guess part of the research, and that's why, like I said earlier when we first started talking, I don't do the hauntings anymore, because of what you can get mixed up with, or what you can bring home. That's
what can get attached to you.
I mean, if these lights are what caused my eye bleeds, then I'm a walking example that the average person shouldn't be playing with these things. I've been to like Moundsville and all these places where you get these teenagers coming in with Ouija boards and stuff, because they want to have an experience like they saw on TV. And I'm thinking, this really isn't a game.
No.
It really isn't. And I've been around it enough now that maybe in the beginning I didn't give it the respect I should have, but over the years, as I experienced things, and I got connected with really, really good researchers, like I said, my perspectives have changed a lot.
Right.
My theories have changed a lot. And I think that's one of the things with the paranormal, regardless of which specific area you're talking about. It's almost an evolving topic.
An evolving door. Yeah, or that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the rabbit holes are just endless.
Oh my God, tell me about it, Tom. Well, one thing I just want to touch on, Tom, too, is you may be right. You're right about one thing, which is what you just said, right? It's the force of nature, which again, I'm just gonna go back to the colors real quick, and then I'll just end it. But to note that we can take away from what you just said about the whole light being nature, basically. Well, red again is a life force. If we look at them as a life force, then by golly, I mean, you found a life force for sure. And
Right.
if we go by yellow, for the lack of being like for ember, right?
Mhm.
We got the fleeting nature. So it totally fled nature after you started to speak out. So I mean, again, but no, that had the word nature in it. So maybe we are dealing with something that involves nature for sure, at least where you guys are for the Chestnut
Right.
Ridge. But you also have a history up there of mining, logging, right? Is it logging?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
And crap, what was the other thing? Or was that it?
Well, I mean, mining was a big industry in the area. Definitely logging. We have a lot of different industries, and it could have been anything.
Right.
Could it have been the disembodied spirit of a dead miner, or could it have been, a Bigfoot before he decided to, turn into, hairy creature form? Yeah, could have been that, or maybe it was something completely natural, that we just don't have the answer for. Maybe
Right.
it wasn't a spirit or demonic or something like that. Maybe it was just some type of natural occurrence that maybe we just don't know about yet. Could be.
Right.
I'm not one of those researchers that's going to tell you, oh, I saw a light and it was a ghost, or I saw a light and it was a
Yeah.
Bigfoot. No, I saw a light, and I can tell you that the light disappeared and I started having eye bleeds, but I can't tell you what the damn thing was. I wish I could,
Right.
because, after going through 3 years of this issue with my eye, I'd really like to at least know what I came in contact with, but I'm probably never going to know. And it's not exactly something I can go in and tell my retinal specialist about. Say, yeah, well, I saw these ghost lights in the woods a couple days before my bleed. Do you think that's it? He'd probably send me over to Western Psych really, really quickly. So,
yeah. So real quick, Tom, I just want to go back to the image again, just to clarify too. So I see the image now. That's your eye, and
right.
I see the circle.
There's a little dot in that circle, and that's
Yep.
where the bleeds are coming from, but they can't laser in that area because it's a 50% chance I'll go blind.
Probably because of all the veins or whatever that are like really, really close.
I'm not sure exactly, but all those little silver spots are scars from the laser procedures, and that picture was taken right before my last laser. After that picture, I got an even 200 more zaps.
What the hell, man? Oh my God, I feel bad for you already. So how?
Yeah,
So
hasn't been fun.
no, it does not sound like it, man. And I mean, I know you said it, and I just want to clarify for the listeners again. So even before all this happened, like your experience, you had no eye bleeds at all.
Nothing. I had perfect vision. Never had an eye injury. Never had an eye problem. Had this encounter with whatever it was, whatever these lights were. About 3 or 4 days later, my right eye started, vision was a little blurry. I waited a couple days and ended up seeing the doctor, and that's when they told me I had a hemorrhage, and then it was all downhill from there.
Oh my God, man. So, okay. And then, so we counted that one, and then obviously you said you had diabetes, but again, with what your doctors had said, your numbers are perfect. You should not be having these episodes.
No,
so
that was the first. That was the first thing I asked him, because that's what I assumed it would be.
Right.
And he said no. He said, my A1C had always been between like 6.2 and 6.6. He said that's absolutely
normal, right?
Well, it's not normal. It's good.
Well,
it's good for a diabetic.
That's what I should say. Yeah.
Yeah. It's when you start getting over 8 that you start running into danger. So, yeah, he said I asked him, is there any possibility it could be the diabetes? He said, absolutely not. So that was my only theory going into it, as to what I thought it could have been. And then that's, again, my only other, and I'm not even going to call it an explanation. I don't know that it was the lights that did this, but the only other thing was I had that encounter 3 or 4 days prior.
Right. Now, and then that's when it started to do it. It was
that's when it started. So.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I don't want to flat out say it's the whites either, Tom, but I mean, in your case, when you're starting to check out, those two things that I said, I can't even think of another example that I could give to try to say, like, well, could it be this? Because the next thing would be the light experience, and then that's when the stuff happened afterward. But if you've been good all the way up until here, I mean, what else could it be?
Yeah. I mean, maybe at some point down the road, maybe they'll come up with a theory and give me an explanation, but as of yet, they're stumped.
Yeah, I would be stumped too as a doctor, but wow, man. Well, Tom, I mean, I don't want to keep you much more, but I'm really glad that I was able to talk to you and hear your side of this, because, again, like you just said, and I'll say it again too for the listener, it sounds like this is something we definitely don't want to, quote, play with. Right. And it's because we just don't know what could happen. And I'll just say this for the sake is, if we do go by the color examples of what they could possibly mean with the say for the sake here, I mean, if we go by what I mentioned about red, and I'm not going to read through all this again, but man, dude, like, that's pretty bad. And if we look at anything that's red, usually of what that could mean, that's usually danger anyway. It should be red flag galore. But anyway, I mean, Tom, I'm glad that you're doing, I mean, I guess okay for the time being.
Yeah. It's unfortunately, this is something I'm going to live with, going forward. But it's not fun, but it's not every day. So you know, you get through it. I mean, there's nothing else you can do. You go out hunting for Bigfoot or whatever. You worry about. I could have been bit by a rattlesnake, a copperhead, whatever. There's always risks when you go out and do this kind of stuff. And I'm not glad it happened, but it's part of the risk, I guess. And I don't want to have another experience like that. But
no, I wouldn't want you to either. But no, you kind of set the example though of these things might not be as, quote, friendly as we could think they are.
Right.
So either way, you're still a walking example of what can happen. So
I guess so.
Well, I mean, let's hope that people learn from, I don't want to say mistakes, but I mean, you didn't know what was going to happen for you.
Right.
And I mean, I couldn't have told you that. But
being an investigator, you want to have the experience. We don't go out there to run in the other direction. You always like to think as a researcher that if you see something, you're going to go investigate it. And, I did, and it is what it is. If that's what caused it, then nobody to blame. It is what it is. And if it wasn't, then hopefully someday I'll figure out what the hell caused it.
Dude, if you ever find out and get that answer, I'd love to hear what they can come up with for sure. So, but yeah, Tom, again, I want to thank you for your time and everything else, but like, you kind of answered it a little bit, I think, but I'll just to clarify too. But have you gone back to the Chestnut Ridge after?
Oh yeah. We were up at Area X just a few weeks ago.
Perfect.
Yeah, so we're going to continue to go back, and if you don't mind me throwing out a quick shameless plug, if there is anybody out there listening and you have any type of sighting, in the Pennsylvania area, West Virginia, Ohio, pabigfoot.com is our website for the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Society. We'd love to hear about any sightings or any experiences. We keep everything completely confidential. So if anyone's out there and has anything they want to share, we'd love to hear it.
Awesome, Tom. Well, you just answered what I was going to ask you if there was anything you would like to, to share out there for the world to see. And if it's all right with you, Tom, I'll share this image on the the article for this episode so people can see it and understand what we were discussing as well.
Yeah.
So I'll have it up. Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that's it, Tom. And if you have anything else that you would like to share, maybe we can talk again for Bigfoot when it becomes National Sasquatch Day back in next year, October, since this one has already gone by. But yeah, would love to talk to you again if you have anything else that you would love to, share.
I appreciate you having me on. It was great. Anytime you want to talk, just reach out.
Sounds good, Tom. And for everybody out that is listening, if you've encountered these strange lights, we would like to hear from you too. So, again, go to hauntedvermont.org and you can contact us there. In this episode, I will have everything that Tom has mentioned, especially the pabigfoot.com or .org. .com. And I'll have all that in the episode description. And until next time, everybody,